So we're in a sermon series called The Feast, in which we're tracing the theme of feasting from the beginning of the Bible, the book of Genesis, all the way through to Revelation. And last week we started in Genesis, and one of the things that we talked about was how God, in the Garden of Eden, God creates an ordered universe. He orders the garden in such a way that it's for human flourishing. So he lays out a feast, just like an ancient king would lay out a giant banquet table and invite his guests in. So too, God has set out this feast and is inviting us all in. And today we're going to be in the next book of the Bible, Exodus, where we see this story unfold. And I just want to invite us to continue to trace that theme of feasting through. And so in Genesis, you see that God lays out this feast for us, this ordered cosmos, and he says, there's all these trees and they bear fruit, and you can eat from any tree, eat the fruit, enjoy yourself, eat this lavish meal. And then what happens is that humans, in Genesis chapter 3, humans begin to be, they receive the deception of the serpent. And the deception goes like this. Did God really say that you could eat from all the trees or could not eat from all the trees? It's this subtle deception that stirs up in the imagination of humans this question. Is God going to give me what is good? Or do I have to go get it for myself? And so you have in Genesis 3 humans believing that deception. God's not going to give me what I need. God's not going to give me what's good. And then you have humans reaching out their hand and taking for themselves. And even that idea of reaching out their hand to take, what happens is all through the Bible. And what you see from the Adam and Eve story to Cain and Abel to the Noah story, all the way through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the way through Genesis, you have these moments where people do not believe that God will give them what is good. And so they take it upon themselves to take. And what you see in Genesis all the way through Genesis, and in fact through the whole Bible, is that when people choose to take it upon themselves, to get for themselves what is good, they oftentimes dominate over others. And so in Genesis, when God creates humans, he says to the humans, you have dominion over all the trees, over all the earth, but not each other. So in Genesis 1 and 2, God lays out a feast for humans, and he says, humans, you have dominion over the things that I've created, but not each other. The domination or dominion is not meant to be over each other. Everyone is a guest at the table. Everyone is equal at the table. And yet through Genesis, when people reach out their hand and take, they oftentimes hurt each other. And today we're going to get into a story that speaks to that reality. And Adventure Kids, I want to let you know that in just a few minutes, I'm going to need your help. So in just a few minutes, Adventure Kids, I'm going to have you join me up here for a very special part of the sermon that I am really excited to share with you. It's going to be a 4-dimensional experience that we're going to experience in the sermon. So just, if you brought some adults with you, just let them know in just a few minutes, you're going to join me up here, okay, Adventure Kids? And then if the adults want to join you, if they want to come with you, that's fine. But remember, this is going to be a 4-dimensional experience. It's going to be amazing. Now, how we get into the Exodus story. So Genesis kind of concludes with this story of there's a famine in the land. So you know what the opposite of a feast is? Famine, right? So you have God's promises of a feast, and yet because humans have sinned and turned their back on God and gone their own way, you now have famine. You now have all this brokenness and corruption in the world. And so there's this famine, and there's this dude named Joseph. So there's this dude named Abraham early in Genesis. Then he has a son Isaac. Then he has a son Jacob. Jacob has many sons. And one of the sons of Jacob is a dude named Joseph. And Joseph is through a series of bad circumstances. He's brought into Egypt. And then all of a sudden there's this famine that's going to happen. And one of the things that God does is he uses Joseph, who's a foreigner to Egypt. He uses Joseph to not only save Egypt, but also save a multitude, like a bunch of other people too. And so that's how you end the book of Genesis, is God using, in a really bad circumstance, using Joseph, the foreigner, to save Egypt. And then we pick it up in Exodus, and you see here in chapter 1, verse 6, and if you have a Bible, I invite you to turn here. We're going to be in Exodus in various parts today, chapters 1 through, I think, 10 today we'll get through. Not the whole thing. Don't freak out, just little bits. So we're going to go through a bit of the story. So you get in Genesis chapter 1, verse 6, Joseph and all of his brothers and all that generation eventually died. But the Israelites were fruitful, increased rapidly, multiplied, and became extremely numerous so that the land in Egypt was filled with them. So real quick, TV timeout. Have you guys ever heard of the book of Genesis? Okay, so in Genesis, what God does is he creates the cosmic order. He creates order out of chaos, and then he creates humans, and he says to humans, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and have dominion over it. Again, not dominion over each other, but dominion over like the trees and stuff like that. And now here in Exodus, you get a rhyme, or you get you pick up the song, right? Like here we have in Exodus, what's happening with with Joseph's descendants and Jacob's descendants. They are being fruitful, multiplying, filling the earth. You tracking? So in Exodus, you're going to get a lot of the same words and themes that you picked up in the book of Genesis. Verse 8, a new king who did not know about Joseph, everyone say, uh-oh. Now remember what Joseph was. There was this famine, and God used, in a bad circumstance, God used Joseph to do what for Egypt? To save him, right? Now, the Pharaoh at the time, or king of Egypt at the time, would he have been happy about Joseph? Yeah, the early king with Joseph, because remember, Joseph saved him. He's like, I like this guy. But then in verse 8, a new Pharaoh, or a new king who did not know about Joseph came into power in Egypt. Uh-oh. Because why? Because he forgot that Joseph saved him. He said to his people, look, the Israelite people are more numerous and powerful than we are. Now, that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration. You know how sometimes you're so hungry and you say things like, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse? You guys ever heard somebody talk like that before? It's this word like hyperbole. It's exaggerated, like it's speaking really big to make a big point. And here, the king of Egypt is so scared, what he says is that the people of Jacob are so many, they outnumber us, which is probably not true, given that he's talking about all of Egypt. But here he is, and he's creating anxiety about these outsiders, saying, look, they're more powerful than we are. Verse 10, come, let's deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise, they will multiply further, and when war breaks out, they will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. Now, what's interesting here is Pharaoh says, I am afraid of them, because if our enemy comes in, they will join the enemy, and then they will leave. So what he's about to do next is he says in verse 11, the Egyptians assigned taskmasters over the Israelites to oppress them with forced labor. So he says, all right, you foreigners, you are scaring us. There's too many of you, so we're going to oppress you with hard labor. We're going to enslave you. And so the Egyptians make it really difficult for the Israelites, or for the Hebrews, or for the children of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph's kin. And so that's where we get. And what happens in the story is that the pain that Egypt causes them continues over and over, and it expands more and more and more to where it's unbearable. And then they're crying out, they're saying, oh, God, help us. And then there's this dude named Moses. Everybody say Moses. Moses. So Moses is born. And Moses is born at a time where the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, is so afraid of the outsiders that he says, listen. Now this is really messed up. He says, listen, if there's a boy that's born to those people, I want you to throw him in the Nile and drown him. That's bad news, right? That's horrible. But this king is so afraid that he's willing to kill kids. That's horrible. And so what's fascinating, though, is that some of the people, the women, there's these two women in particular named Shiphrah and Puah. Everyone say Puah. Isn't that a fun word to say? Shiphrah and Puah. There you go. So they defy the king, and they secretly don't do that to the kids. And so they hide from the king. And so there's boys born, and God works through this powerful way. And then there's this young boy named Moses who's born. So Moses, his mom has to give him away, and through God's providence, the daughter of Pharaoh finds Moses and is like, I'm going to adopt this kid as my own. That's a pretty crazy part of the story. And then raises Moses in the palace, but then Moses has to run away as an adult. But then God calls him back. So Moses is like it's like he's old by the time that God calls him back. And God says, listen, you need to go back to Pharaoh's palace, and I'm going to use you to redeem, or another way to save my people. Remember, what were the people experiencing under Pharaoh's control? Was everything awesome? No, they were experiencing what? Like oppression, like they were slaves in Egypt. And so they were very harsh with them. And so God says to Moses, I want you to go back, which is dangerous. And I'm going to use you, Moses, to be my mouthpiece to speak to Pharaoh, because I'm going to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Now, this is interesting because that's actually one of the things Pharaoh was concerned would happen. I want you, Moses, to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Now, Moses is like, nah, bro. And he has this argument with God. He wrestles with God. And you know who wins? God wins. Moses finally says, okay, I'm going to do what you asked. And so he goes with his brother Aaron, and he goes and he talks to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's been dominating over other people. And what he's been doing is he's been leveraging like all the abundance of the earth. He's been trying to hoard it for himself, trying to make his own name great. So what God wants to spread the banquet table out for all of us in Genesis, Pharaoh here tries to control it and dominate over other people. He tries to use chaos and pain and harm to control people. And what God is going to say through Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh is, if you do keep doing that, I'm going to give you a taste of your own medicine. What God's going to say through Moses to Pharaoh is, if you keep doing this chaos and violence to people, then I'm going to do it to you. And so you have this moment where God calls Moses to Pharaoh. Now, what God does is he brings these signs or wonders, or sometimes, have you guys ever heard of the 10 plagues of Egypt? That's not a bad way to think of it. They're just not all plagues. Some of them are actually, like, another way to view it, and this is it's going to sound a little bit strange. It's a sign, but it's also a strike. It's kind of like God saying, wake up. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like a little bit of a slap in the face, like a strike, like, hey, wake up. He's going to bring some of the chaos that Pharaoh is doing to others, he's going to bring it on Pharaoh to say, wake up, let my people go. And so you have this story of these 10 strikes or these 10 plagues. Now, the way that it's structured in Exodus is there's 3 sets of 3. So 3, you guys ever heard the word triplet before? It's 3 triplets. It's 3, 3, 3, and then a final one. Now, here's what we're going to do. Over the next few weeks, we're actually going to hang out in Exodus, and we're going to talk about the final one of the strikes in future Sundays. So today, we're just going to look at the first 3 sets of triplets, so the first 9 of the plagues. And now it is time for our highly interactive, 4-dimensional storytelling time. So children, if you would please come up here to the front. We're going to gather around for a story time. I have been preparing, and if we can have my friends, I've got some props. I have really just, come on up, kids. We're just going to gather around here on the floor. I have been prayerfully meditating. Right here on the floor, please. And I think Miss Amy can help us find our way to seating arrangements right here on the floor. Now, what I want you guys to do is sit crisscross applesauce. Are you guys giving the story or are you receiving the story? So sit down there, crisscross applesauce, and face me. Yeah. All right. Hello, children. I have been prayerfully considering which of these plagues that I will bestow upon you to illustrate the story. Now, the plagues, remember that they're kind of like God saying, hey, wake up, kind of like strikes, like, whoa. And so I have thought about the things that would be the most striking illustrations for us today. And if you think that you're going to enjoy yourself, all right, are you guys ready?
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait for what's about to happen. Okay, now, first of all the strikes. So in Egypt, which a lot of it was like desert. Have you guys ever seen the desert before? Yeah. Is there a lot of water in the desert? No. Not a lot of water. So when there's water, it's really precious, right? So in Egypt, there was this river called the Nile River, and it was kind of the source of all of life. And so without the Nile, the water from the Nile River, people in Egypt, they wouldn't be eating, right? Because there'd be no fish, there'd be no water for the crops. And so the first of all the strikes, the first of all the plagues, is that the water of the Nile turns into this sludgy, kind of rotten, blood-like material that like stinks. Blah. If you were like super thirsty one day and you wanted a nice cold drink of water, but it was like sludgy, blood-like, stinky, would you drink it? No. It's gross. Now, I was gonna bring something like that, but we just put in new carpet, and so I felt like, best not have you drink that today. So, but what would happen is that the Nile turns to this sludge, and the fish die, and so this source of life for Egypt now becomes a source of unlife or not life. And so that was the first strike. And then in chapter 8, it says this, "Then the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh and tell him, this is what the Lord says, let my people go, so that they may worship me. But if you refuse to let them go, I will plague all of your territory with frogs." Everyone say ribbit. Ribbit. Now, here's the deal. Remember like in Genesis how we've said God orders everything in its proper place and that creates flourishing for humans? So what you have around the Nile River are all these frogs. Frogs are like aquatic type, they're amphibians. They like being around water, you know what I'm talking about? But then what happens is that the strike against Pharaoh in Egypt is the frogs actually leave the Nile River and they go all over the place and create chaos. They even go into people's bedrooms. So they're snuggling up for a little sleep, and then there's like ribbit, 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 and it's just a room's full of frogs. Now, is that a flourishing environment? No, it's not. And to illustrate that, I actually have 2 live frogs right here. They're actually rabid.
Hold on. Excuse me. I'm sorry. My name is Steve, again, from OLST.
And my name is Enrique, and I am from OLST as well, the Object Lesson Safety Team.
That's right. We specialize in 2 different areas, actually splash camps and what we call OSPAL.
That's right, OSPAL, overzealous pastors and leaders.
So anyways, I know sometimes pages get a little sticky. Maybe you missed this page, but I need to read section 6-12-122-4 that states this: no semi-aquatic group of short-bodied, tailless amphibian vertebrates shall be used indoor or for teaching, demonstrating, or instruction.
Basically, you can't do this, bro.
This is government overreach.
Well, instead, how about this? How about instead of live frogs, we do frog stickers?
Frog stickers, yes.
That's dumb.
Okay.
We need to capture the essence of the strike. This has to be striking.
How about this? I have frog poppers.
All right.
See, better sticker.
You are excused. So the land was full of frogs. And they were popping around. Can you guys do the thing? Everywhere you'd go, it'd be like, ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. Now, where were the frogs supposed to be? Ah! They're everywhere. Moses did not throw the frogs. They just jumped everywhere. So that was the second of all the strikes, is these frogs are everywhere. And what it showed is just like how Pharaoh was trying to control everything, trying to act outside of God's order or out of God's desire, so too, when you act outside of God's desire, often chaos ensues. And so the frogs were there. Now, what's interesting is that there were some other people other than Pharaoh called sorcerers or magicians. And you know what they did? Not only when the Nile turned to that bloody sludge, they were able to replicate that act, but also with the frogs, they were also able to make more frogs come up out of the Nile. So you've got God acting, and then you have people experiencing that wake-up call. But then some of the magicians who were there standing in for other gods, they were able to replicate it too for some of these strikes or some of these plagues, and they were able to do it for the frogs. Check this out. You know what the sorcerers were able to do more of? They were able to create more chaos. But you know what they weren't able to do? Create order. They weren't able, with all of their powers, to put things back in their proper place. And so then we have another strike, the third. It's in chapter 8, verse 16. And it is what's sometimes translated as gnats or lice. And so it's like these biting little insects. Have you guys ever heard about lice? It gets in your hair and just burrows in. And so in chapter 8, verse 16, it said this: "Then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the land." Have you guys ever taken dirt and thrown it up into the air? Just, and then it gets all over, sand. So he says, strike it, and as the dust goes up, it will become like lice and will go over all the people. And so there, it's kind of like Genesis, how God uses the dust of the earth to create humans. Now, it's the dust of the earth creating these biting lice. You guys know what I'm talking about? Have you ever had a lice outbreak at your school? Yeah. So to illustrate this, I snuck into Paradise Valley Unified School District, their safe, and I found this hermetically sealed hat. This is the source of the 2013 lice outbreak of Paradise Valley Unified.
Hold on.
I want each of you to put this on your head.
No, please, hold on. I need to read something to you, very important. 14-2-34-566, which states, "No repugnant, nauseous, brackish, grisly, barbarous, off-putting, or parasitic adjacent object lesson can be used." Thanks.
So basically, don't be nasty, bro. So
What do you have in mind?
So instead of lice, how about you say something nice
Nice.
instead?
You want me to illustrate this plague by saying something nice?
Nice.
Yes, it kind of rhymes too.
Speaking of rhyme, actually, I have something.
We need something better.
I've got rice.
Oh.
See? I got rice. Oh.
And so, you are excused.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
Ugh.
Aaron took his staff and he struck the earth, and all the dust became like rice. And it was this way, and that way, and this way. It would have been better if it was. Oh. Okay, let's continue with this. Listen, they're gonna let me do some of these, trust me. Now, another one of the strikes or plagues was the fourth, and it's this interesting translation. It's sometimes translated as a swarm of flies. We actually don't know what kind of insect, but it's some sort of biting, swarmy creature. And I couldn't quite find a swarm of biting little, insect creatures, but I did find a rabid raccoon back in the dumpster. Let's bring him out. I'm sure he's got flies on him. Bring out that raccoon. Here we go.
Oh no.
Wait.
Dios mío, no.
Yes. 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 Okay, you guys ready for this?
Hey, wait, stop
hold
real
up.
quick. Before you do that, let me just read section 3-12-617.
No, we're gonna lose him.
That says, no living or taxidermy mammal, amphibian, vertebrate, or invertebrate can be used within 50 feet of a minor.
So basically, you're crazy, bro. You can't do that.
All right, thank you. Take him away.
So no live
listen,
animals, Steve.
I'll live
take him
animals.
home.
No
I'll
live
take him
I don't
home.
think that's no. But how about, I got it. How about some
This is gonna be
stuffed
lame.
animals?
Stuff down here. No.
Is that a baby shark?
That is a baby shark.
I can't make that work. It was a stretch to do the rabid raccoon.
But, okay, I have an idea. I've got an idea. Hold on. See a little, what about this? People love bears, and they especially love teddy bears.
Oh, gummy bears.
Gummy
All right, you
bears.
gotta stay back
Those are
there.
actually edible.
Now, here's the deal. Bears scare me. So I will distribute these at the end of our 4-dimensional object lesson, okay? And then you got to take this back to whatever adults brought you here and ask them if it's okay. And if it's not, you'll take this to our splash can table. They'll exchange it for something that you can have,
right,
okay?
awesome.
Thank you, Object Lessons Safety Team. All right, listen, we're gonna tell this one quiet so they don't hear me. Here we go, right here. So, check this out. What happened in the first few strikes is irritating, but it's not deadly, right? It's like annoying, it's biting, but here is a pivot that happens in the text. All of a sudden, you get things that actually cause like some of the creatures and stuff to die. So in chapter number 9, you get the death of all the livestock. Then you get this sickness that produces boils, and everyone's suffering. And even the magicians are no longer able to keep up. The sorcerers can't keep up with Moses. They can't even replicate what he's doing. And then you get hail. You get hail. Now, in the desert, is it good when water rains in the desert? But when it's frozen big balls of ice, what can happen is destruction. So have you guys, in verse 13 through 35, you have that this hail is going to come down on the people and livestock if they don't take shelter. And so it's a matter of trusting God to stay in the shelter. And here's how I'm going to illustrate this. Have you guys ever been to Sonic?
Yes.
I've got 27 bags of those little frozen nuggets at Sonic up in the rafters. And my guys are up there, and they're going to drop it all on us.
Hold on.
No, excuse me. I feel like I need to remind you of section 2-1-13-14-6, which states no frozen water objects shall be tossed, thrown, dropped, hurled, or otherwise propelled with inertia toward any living being.
So basically, tell your guys to go back home.
Okay, I'm sure you have some lame way for me to do the hail thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't
please.
think we could do frozen objects from the ceiling, but how about some cotton balls?
Cotton balls.
That's a total snoozer. I need something to strike.
Ping pong balls.
Ooh, I could strike the kids
See,
with
that's not
these.
bad. That was good.
And so the hail came from the sky. No, you got to sit down. All right, are you ready for it to ping pong?
Yeah.
Okay, last one. Here we go. We got one more. Check this out. There was another strike.
Let me guess.
There were some who took shelter from the hail, ping pong balls, and there was others who suffered under it. And then this giant swarm of locusts came. Now, locusts are these types of bugs that eat all of the crops. And if there's no crops, people can't eat, yeah? And if people can't eat, they're going hungry. And so this giant swarm of locusts came in. Now, the locusts are all dormant in Phoenix, but what I did find is flesh-eating grasshoppers.
Hold on.
Yep, no.
Hold on. Section 1, acridid violation. No. Let me read this. No living, understand me? No living, acridid, or smaller specimen called grasshoppers shall be used in any object lessons where minors are present.
That's right. So once again, you can't do this, bro.
I have an
Did
idea.
you say living?
Yes, I did say living,
Crickets?
but hold on. Let's just do this instead. Let's all chirp like a cricket.
Steve, as cute as that is, I have something better. I have some chocolate-covered crickets here.
Chocolate-covered cricket, does that work?
You did say living.
I did say
but
living.
These guys aren't living anymore, so.
All right.
Who wants to eat a chocolate-covered cricket? All right, I'm gonna save it right here, and you can take this to whatever adults brought you and ask them to share with you in this delightful feast. All right, back on the floor. All right, now, the last of the 9 plagues before the 10th was really, really scary. And we're not gonna do it today, but the last of the 9 is darkness. Now, do you remember the book of Genesis? You know, one of the first things that God says in Genesis is, let there be light. And there was light. And so God taking the light away for 3 days reminds us that ultimately every good gift comes from him. And what he's trying to communicate to Pharaoh is, look, dude, when you try to do chaos to dominate over people, you try to control all of creation, to lord over people and act against my way, I can take even the light away. And so for 3 days it was dark. And it reminds us even of like the 3 hours of darkness, like when Jesus died. and the 3 days that Jesus stayed in darkness in the tomb. And so this series of 9 plagues, it was a way for God to communicate, to do a wake-up call to Pharaoh, who is trying to work against what God designed. Now, thank you so much for being part of my 4-dimensional object lesson. Thank you to the object lesson team. Who wanted the crickets? You did. Here you go. Take it to your grown-ups who brought you here. And then for the rest of you, grab this and then head back to your seats. Just one each. Hey, remember, the feast is for everyone to share. One each, one each, one each. Hey, my dude, I've given you 2 already. I got kids. I know how this game is played. Get out of here. Boop. 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 Hey, pretty. How are you?
You didn't meet the lice in the factory.
I have lice. Okay, anybody else? All right, go back to your grown-ups.
Thank you. Hey, Caleb.
Get out of here. Let's give it up for everybody. I didn't give you one?
No, I just got here. Caleb.
All right, now, I bet you've never experienced the plagues of Egypt in quite such a robust way. You have. You have in this text that sometimes got a lot of stuff that's really difficult to understand. But one of the things that's a through line through this text is, number one, God heard his people. They were crying out. Remember that Pharaoh was trying to leverage creation and the abundance to get just for himself, and he was oppressing and dominating over people, and they were crying out to God. And so one of the things that we can take away from this is, like, even when other people are trying to do domination over us, God does hear us. Number 2, check this out. How long were they crying out for? More than like a couple hours, yeah? It was a long time. It was many, many years of them crying out. And so we know that God hears us, but we also know that God is sometimes acting in ways that we don't see right away. And that he's pulling all of these streams together, even though we can't see it. And then God, he raises up Moses, and he brings Moses. And he says to Moses, Moses, I'm going to use you to confront Pharaoh and to call Pharaoh back. And here's what's interesting about Moses and Pharaoh. Number one, was Moses like stoked about his new calling? In fact, didn't he wrestle with God about it? Like he was like, God, I do not want to do what you're asking me to do. And he wrestled with God about it. And so sometimes it can even be difficult. Like even some of the most like faithful people in the Bible, they're not like, yes, of course you have picked me. They're usually uncertain of their own abilities, uncertain of the future, confused about how God's gonna work, not even sure that the God that's talking directly to them knows what God's doing. And we see that in Moses, we see it in many of the characters in the Bible. And so if you've ever felt a calling from God where you're feeling uncertain about your own calling and gifting, uncertain about the future, uncertain about the circumstances, uncertain about even the God who's calling you, I just want you to know that you're in good shape. This is a very common place to be. And God uses people like Moses, like you and me, to bring about his good end. We also see, remember those sorcerer dudes? What's interesting, and later today when you go home and read all of Exodus, which you should totally do, pay special attention. In the first few strikes, the sorcerers are able to replicate it, but they're not able to restore order. That the magic, the dark arts, as sometimes gets translated, that the gods of Egypt, that there is power to create chaos that these sorcerers have, but they can only do a facsimile, a mirror image. They can only do a poor replication of the chaos, but they cannot do what God does in Genesis, that is, bring order. When the frogs come out of the Nile and they invade people's houses, the sorcerers can't make them go back. And what you see with the power of chaos and these wielders of the power of chaos, what you see is they actually start disappearing from the story. They can't compete with the order and power of God. And sometimes it may feel like chaos is being used by other people against us. But those who use chaos cannot bring the good order and the flourishing that God has designed for us. Only God can bring about that restoration and reorder. The other thing that we notice in this text too is that each of these strikes or signs, it's the undoing of the creation story. It's creation without God's ordered hand. And sometimes we look at these stories like the gnats and the hail and the water and the darkness, and just notice the reason why that stuff is so striking to us is because these things are out of order. It's creation run amok. And here's something that I've been thinking about for years. What's Pharaoh doing? Is Pharaoh living within the order that God has designed, or is he living out of order? You tell me. He's living out of order. Remember, God in Genesis sets a feast for all of us to come to, a table for all of us to experience that flourishing, and that we have dominion over those created things, but we don't have dominion or domination over other people. What's Pharaoh doing? He's trying to be the God of the universe, and he's using chaos and pain and violence over people to push them down so that he can be brought up. And one of the things that we see in this is, I think one of the things that God's trying to say to us is, those who leverage chaos for their own gain will be the recipients of chaos. Those who leverage this disintegrating power of chaos and everything to scare people and to force them to do what they want, that God is in such a position to bring that very chaos onto their doorstep. A word for this, and the biblical theme kind of traces this out through, a word for this would be like justice and righteousness. That God is one who makes sure that everything is in order. And so when we are operating out of order, he is in a position to either reorder and restore or redeem or forgive, or visit if we are turning our backs. He can sometimes visit that chaos upon us to wake us up. And he sends 10 of these strikes to Pharaoh to wake him up. And we'll see what happens in the weeks to come. But I would like for us to remember that the ultimate expression of God's reordering is in Jesus. That Jesus enters into, he becomes flesh, he becomes human, he enters into creation, and he suffers the disorder. He suffers under, you guys ever heard of Christmas? Remember that part of the Christmas story where Herod, who's like a king, is afraid of the young boys and tries to have the young boys killed? You guys ever heard of this before? Isn't that exactly what Pharaoh did? And so in a sense, Jesus is born into a similar story to what the Hebrews were born into in the Exodus account. And yet Jesus suffers under the hand of Caesar, who was also trying to leverage all that craziness and chaos to lord over people. And what happened to Jesus was he died on a Roman cross. But then he reordered, redeemed, restored, resurrected. He resurrects. He is made new. And he says to all of us that no matter what happens to us, that he has the power to renew and restore. That in his resurrection, he shows that we too will resurrect. And then all the brokenness and chaos that we see will be reordered in him and his power. And so we live in light of that reordering power, that he invites us back to the feast, even though we may live in a time where those who are also invited to the feast are creating chaos. And so let me pray for us. Lord, we give to you this time. And as we think deeply about the feast and your provision for us and our place at the table, would you help to shape us into the kind of people who live in light of Jesus day by day and moment by moment? We pray this in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. Amen and amen. In just a moment, our prayer team will be available here at the front. If you'd like prayer, please just come down forward. They'll pray with you. And if you would, please stand as Samali leads us in our closing doxology.